Welcome to the Association 100 podcast. The A100 podcast is an extension of our Association 100 bi-monthly newsletter that focuses on best practices, top trends, helpful ideas, and smart strategies and tactics that work in the world of associations. The podcast will feature meaningful conversations with association professionals across the country, taking a deeper dive into trending topics, offering insights that both inform and inspire.
Welcome back to the A100 podcast. I'm your host, Colin Gallagher, and I'm so excited to welcome our guest today, Kara Dickerson. Kara is the founder of Content with Impact, and I had the privilege of seeing Kara's work in action at the very beginning of my career when I was at the Consumer Technology Association. Kara has over a dozen years of experience positioning Fortune 500 executives and innovators as influential thought leaders and brand stewards for their industries. Most recently, she was the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and Conferences for the Consumer Technology Association, producer of CES, which so many of our listeners know is the world's most influential tech event and just one of the leading global platforms for CEO thought leadership. I still joke that was my very first association trade show, and that probably was not a good first one to go to because nothing else can ever really measure up. But Kara was the one curating the globally renowned CS Keynote stage and the conference program, which just showcased the stories of technological innovation that are truly reshaping our world. She's placed thousands of corporate leaders and innovators in prominent speaking placements that enhance their personal and shareholder value. She's launched events across Asia and Europe, including CS Asia and Shanghai, and has created conferences for startups, C-level execs, nonprofit boards, and government leaders. I am so excited to tap into her expertise and experience and know our listeners will take so much away from this episode. Kara, thank you for joining me on the A100 today.
Hi, Colleen. Thank you so much for having me. It's great for us to be reconnected. As you mentioned, we work together and we're colleagues at CTA. So I love the work that you guys are doing and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. We're so happy to have you. And I'd love to start by having you share a bit about your current work and what inspired you to found this company.
As you mentioned, the last corporate role that I had was overseeing the content strategy and the conference curation for CES, which is the most influential global platform for the technology industry. And as part of that role, not only were we doing a lot of really creative storytelling for the tech industry from this massive trade show platform, but my team was also curating events year-round on behalf of the membership of the Consumer Technology Association. So we were very connected with everything that our members were focused on and really looked at our work as an opportunity to help lift them up. And so after spending 20 some years, I'm going to date myself, but I'll throw the big numbers out, 20 years working in the technology industry and actually 25 years working in nonprofits, so that the trade association world is something I'm very deeply steeped in. I felt like it was an exciting time for me to take that experience and really look to apply that across other events. One of the things that I love about my job and I loved the most is when I get to learn about something new. And a new industry perhaps was coming to CES and I got to really explore how technology was maybe impacting the food and agriculture industry or the health industry. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to take that skill set and start working with clients, not only to offer my experience in working with these events for so long, but for me to learn from them. So I last year founded Content with Impact, and what I'm doing there is helping to craft event content strategy for events of all sizes. Certainly, trade associations are the organizers of so many of the most amazing events out there. I'm also working with private event organizers and strategic communications agencies to really help them think about what makes a strong story, what's going to have the most impact, how can we drive more revenue to our events, and how can we help bring new attendees and categories of people to benefit from the work that we're creating. So that's what I'm doing with Content with Impact.
I love hearing people's journeys and just seeing people take these cool leaps into really important areas where people need help. I've heard you speak about using event content to engage new audiences, unlock monetization opportunities. Can you elaborate there? What are some good strategies you've seen or some ways to launch new categories within conference programs?
So one of the first things that I would always recommend that an organizer do, the first steps is to start taking a deep dive into the data that you have, right? That is the foundation for everything. It's a really amazing opportunity to read the tea leaves and understand who are the unexpected companies or industries that are coming to your event if you've been producing this event already. Are there new job titles, levels of people that are coming? Is there a trend that you're starting to see that you might be able to capitalize on and really think about leveraging with your event content strategy? And I can give you an example because I think sometimes it's easier if you have a story to connect with a point like that. So at CES, if we take this back maybe a decade ago, one of the things that we were seeing as we were looking at our event data is we were seeing unexpected company names pop up, right? So this was a technology show, but we were starting to see major movie studios attending. We were starting to see large marketing and advertising agencies. Of course, this was the height of the internet. And so we were looking at some of the platforms like Facebook and Twitter who were coming to the show, but weren't engaged. They weren't exhibiting. They weren't sponsoring. A lot of times they were actually doing what we would call outboarding, meaning they were taking exhibit space. We all don't like that, right? So they were taking space at hotels and they were hosting meetings. And seeing that data point allowed us to start thinking creatively to say, why are they coming? What are they looking to understand? Who are they looking to meet with? And what can we do to actually engage this community responsibly, officially, and in a really creative way with the show? And one of the first ways we did that was with content. So we actually created a keynote panel on the keynote stage and brought in some of the top entertainment executives to talk about why technology was really transforming their business. And that allowed us to say, here's some ways that these industry leaders and visionaries are embracing this technology and really transforming their entire industry using our products. And that was just the very beginning of a content strategy that ultimately resulted in an entire stage being developed just for chief marketing officers who were really some of the first to embrace the use of technology in their interactions with customers. And ultimately that resulted in an entire venue being created for CES just for this community. And it is now one of the most vibrant and profitable areas of the show. So I think if you really are paying attention to the data, thinking about the way your content strategy can tie into that, it may take a couple of years, but you can create some pretty incredible things from that.
That's so smart. And I really believe that all good strategies are data-driven. They just are. The other piece of what you said that I really like and I think is smart to think about is that it can take years. You're looking at CES and something taking years. So you've got to be patient, strategic, and smart in your efforts and know that you're doing the right thing and it will pay off, but you have to do it smartly and you can't just expect everything to work overnight.
That's such an important point, right? We always need to be looking ahead and understanding that sometimes in order to reach a big, audacious goal, we have to take small steps. And you may not be able to get where you want to be in year one, but if you have, say, a 3-year strategy and you're chipping away at that and you're starting to really see some momentum picking up, you want to stick with it. Sometimes in the events industry, we can be too quick to just try something once. Maybe we didn't get the full results we wanted and we throw it away and then we try again. And creativity is great and innovation is really important. But we do also have to see things through and really make sure that we're giving it our full effort because it can take some time.
Yeah, my personal favorite in the association events world is getting that survey back after the show. 98% satisfaction. And then 2 people have a write-in and the board jumps on it and says, we need to do all of this differently. And it just makes my head explode. So the patience and the being smart is a big part of it.
Those two people, the squeaky wheel though, they all.
I know. You mentioned a few minutes ago about thinking about different job titles. And that made me think. I've worked at several associations, and there was one in particular that really tried to broaden their audience. So they had a very niche audience that was near retirement age, that their jobs were in essence phasing out. And so they wanted to see, how can we get into these other roles and bring other members in and other audiences to our conference that this content would be really beneficial for, but they don't know it's for them. So what are some innovative ways that you can engage different types of event attendees and bring in new types of audiences too?
I love that question. And actually, I really like the framing of how does an industry continue to engage its future in its events, right? Because quite often you see that. And frankly, I think no one is immune to this. We all have members or companies or individuals perhaps that have been really at the core of the work that we do for the industry who perhaps either aren't as relevant or they're changing their approach and strategy. And so I think, especially with your content, it's a really one of the most flexible ways that you can start engaging new titles and new types of attendees. So maybe you're thinking about a startup area for your show. Are there companies that are really coming in and disrupting the way that your business is being done? How can you engage those companies, not just to exhibit, but also to come in and speak and talk about why they're doing this and what future they see for the industry? And it can also be set up in a way that you are able to facilitate connections and really healthy conversations about what the future can look like. So you can look at, perhaps a stage or a conference track just for this group of people, and then networking opportunities to connect them to maybe the more seasoned companies or executives in the industry. And I think it's also important to remember, and I run across this in a lot of my client work to date with content with impact. Your event content program does not have to be designed for one audience only. So if your primary attendee is a buyer or your primary attendees are maybe installers, sure, let's make 80% of your content focused on them because they really are the heart of what you're doing. But you also can create content maybe for the engineers in your industry or the media that are covering your industry. And I think the more flexible you can think about the types of people you're trying to reach with your content, the more amplification you have for your industry. So I highly recommend looking at different tracks for different types of people because one size does not fit all, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you mentioned media too. Some associations do that really well, and then others, that's not really a thought when they're planning their conference or their convention. So that's a really smart thing because talk about being able to amplify, get those people there.
Absolutely. And one of the traps that we fall in sometimes is, okay, media won't pay. They won't buy a conference pass. They're not going to be really a pipeline of revenue. And that's true. I think any content that you're creating for that community should be free. Don't put up obstacles to them. But what they can do is really expand your reach in a way that perhaps your average attendee can't. And so just look at the return, the ROI for that investment in a different way. The data point that you're going to be measuring the success of that engagement is going to be different than perhaps the data points you're using to look at the success of the rest of your conference program.
Yeah, that's a smart way of looking at it. I'd love to talk about how organizations can better align their event content strategy with the overall brand goal. Because you talked about data and storytelling, but how does it all come back to that goal of your association's brand?
One of the things that's important and is quite often missed is that the content strategy should be at the table. The team, the people, the person, whatever it is who is really leading that charge should be involved at the very beginning of the strategic planning for your event. quite often the content piece comes in later. And there's a lot of missed opportunities. Having been involved in the executive strategy development for CES for more than 14 years, I can tell you, if we're setting goals to grow revenue or perhaps to launch 2 new categories of exhibitors or sponsors at the show, or to bring in more startups, whatever it may be, content is a really unique and often low lift and low investment way to start building those communities. So I can give you an example. One of the trends that we started to see in technology was how much it was changing and impacting the sports world, right? Thinking about the way that athletes and venues and even broadcasters were using technology to engage with sports fans in really interesting, innovative ways. Again, this is more than a decade ago, right? We've seen that really take big strides. One of the things that we wanted to do at CES was really capture this transformation of the sports industry. And even before we started to see companies making exhibitor investments in the show, we launched content for this community first. And we created a partnership, a strategic partnership with Turner and TNT and their Inside the NBA show, which has so many viewers, and Shaq and Charles Barkley and amazing personalities. And they too wanted to talk about how technology was changing their industry. So we brought them to CES. They broadcast from the show floor, and it really helped to develop a lot of traction for that particular category at the show. So look at content as a way to perhaps be the first out of the gate for something that you're looking to develop, and make sure that your content team is very aware of what the overall goals and KPIs are, because then they can be looking for every opportunity to support the health and growth of the event.
I love that example. And that had to be a very cool experience to bring that to the show floor too.
And super fun to see Shaq zooming around the show floor on electric scooters and things like that.
Oh, that had to be so cool. I would have loved that. That's amazing. One of the things that we always talk about with associations when it comes to your event content, and especially your speakers, is diversity. And representation is so important, and it just really matters. But what is that process and planning like, especially for large scale events? And what could other event organizers take from that and implement in their own associations?
So for me, this issue is something that I'm super, super passionate about, because I feel like it is so critically important, really, not just from a human perspective, but also because this is as we talked about just a few minutes ago, this is the future of your industry. You want to capture every voice, every innovator, every person that is really thinking about what they can be doing to make you better. And you want to capture those voices in your conference program. And I would say for a show of the scale of the one that I used to manage, or a conference program of the scale of the one I used to manage, we had 250 sessions. We had 1,200 plus speakers. It's massive in scale. But if you are very focused and intentional, you can ensure that you have a diverse set of speakers. And there's some things that I think you need to be really focused on. You need to have buy-in from your top management. You need to make sure that if necessary, you have an executive sponsor within your organization that is saying, this is critical for all of us and can help remove any obstacles if there are any. Hopefully there wouldn't be, but you never know. I think you need to make sure that you're benchmarking where you are. We're back to data, right? Like, you can't say where you want to go if you don't know where you are. So make sure you've got that information. Make sure your whole team is tracking that. And then I would suggest setting criteria that can be rolled out, not just across maybe one stage or one session, but your entire program. So an example of that could be no mammals. And I don't know if everybody knows what that word means. It's something
Love the
that's
term.
baked into my head. A mammal is if you look at a conference stage and you might see just 5 men sitting on a panel. We would jokingly call that a mammal, but really that should be criteria. Don't do that. That's not a good thing. If you have some criteria that everyone can understand and you can roll out, you can be a lot more consistent. And our team wrote a purpose statement. We wrote a mission statement for what we were trying to accomplish. And we communicated that very clearly, loudly, and often to everyone who helped us with programming. So everyone has to be part of this. Your in-house content team, any external partners, any consultant, everyone needs to know what your benchmark is. And then lastly, you need to review where you are often. So we would actually do weekly check-ins of all of our sessions and panels as they were coming together to see if we were where we wanted to be. And ultimately, we were reaching 40 to 50% female speakers across our program consistently, which far surpassed the industry average, but really took intention and focus. I love that question, and I hope everyone really takes it seriously because it does take a process and a plan.
That's amazing. I think that answer alone is worth our listeners tuning into this episode. I want to go back to something you said at the very beginning of that so it doesn't get lost, but that top-down buy-in.
Yeah.
That matters so much more than I think some association leaders realize. And if you're not saying it at the top and saying how important it is, you're not going to get your team to galvanize around something like this too. So it really is important.
Just to give you one additional example to the point you were just making, Gary Shapiro, who the CEO of the Consumer Technology Association, where I worked for so many years, one of the things that he did when we were really getting this off the ground and embracing this as a company is not only did he talk about it internally, he talked about it externally. We set a standard that our own executive team and staff wouldn't accept speaking opportunities that did not include a diverse slate of speakers. So even the things we were choosing to engage in needed to meet those same standards we were setting within our own events. So you really need to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk.
That put your money where your mouth is. That's so important. And that shows that you really mean it, not that you're just putting it on your website because you think you need to.
Absolutely.
Another big thing with associations, I'm sure it's everywhere, but this is my world, the silos. Teams can get very much into what they're doing, what matters for their set of needs and wants and desires. What are some great tactics for bridging that gap with the events team and the membership team when you come to an event? Because I know I've seen them butt heads before. I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
Oh, the silos. Yes. The silos they're ever present, right? It's always going to be, I think, an ongoing process to make sure that even once you've broken them down, they're not reforming because that tends to happen. But I think the thing to remember is for any event team in particular, anyone who is helping to create events or content strategy that is listening to this, is that your association members are really your best resource. They are, just handed this amazing curated list of people who are passionate about the work that you're doing. They're experts in the work that you're doing. Their companies are built and based around this. And you're really being tasked with supporting and lifting up the industry through the event work that you're doing in an association. So the more you can get to know your members and collaborate with the membership team, this beautiful virtuous circle can start to be created. And when I was at CTA, we did establish very close connection between our conferences team and our membership team, because again, both of us needed to make sure that we were doing everything we could to meet the organization's goals in any given year. So a great example is CTA a number of years ago. One of the new categories of members, not just at the show, but of members, was in the health category. So digital health really became super important and is now one of the biggest categories at CES. But recruiting those types of companies into the association also was a real priority. And we were able to refer companies and potential members to our membership team. They were able to refer back to us potential speakers that we could pull into our sessions. And it really created this beautiful opportunity to create a category, tell very strong stories, bring in some new revenue, and really develop something strong for the association and for the show. So make sure that your team members are even doing things as informally as just go have lunch with somebody in that department. Figure out what they're working on. What are their challenges? How can you help? And always keep your colleagues in other departments in mind, because you should all be working towards the same goals.
Yeah, you're all on the same team.
Yes. Sometimes we forget, though, that it's very easy to put your blinders on and just get your to-do list done and not remember that we can be helping each other as much as we can be.
Yeah. In associations in particular, you have such huge to-do lists for such smaller teams than you have in some of the corporate world. That leads to that happening so much more easily because, like you said, the blinders go on and you're just trying to check those boxes.
Totally.
We've talked a bit today about some of your experiences with the CES Keynote stage and the conference program. I'd love to hear what learnings have you brought from that into your current work, and how has that experience really shaped your approach to creating impactful content?
I think reflecting back, it was interesting because once I started my business, it really did give me an opportunity to think and be grateful for all that I learned and was able to contribute to as part of that experience with CES. And I would say there's probably three things that I really took from that and I tried to apply to my work with my clients. And the first thing is just think outside of the box. Always look for a way to be creative and innovative. And maybe that's only with 20% of the work that you're doing, and 80% stays, because you can't change everything, right? We know that. We have to get through our days and we have to make sure that everything moves forward. But looking for ways to be creative, I think, is really important. And you also need to have a dual view in everything that you do, especially in events. And what I would say is always look towards the horizon. Look for what's coming. What do you see? How can you create that future for yourself? How can your event help create that future for your industry? But you also need to look behind you. And what I mean by that is not look at your past. You need to look at who is perhaps looking to do it better than you are, or who might be taking part of your business, or who might be saying, this category is one that I can specialize in, and they might be able to peel it off. So you always need to be looking ahead of you, and you need to be looking behind you to understand what's coming in both directions and what you can do to really continue to support the industry. And then I would say, don't be afraid to disrupt yourself, because someone else is probably thinking about how they can do it. So if you can do it first and you can do it in a way that feels productive and good and healthy for the companies that you're trying to support, you can actually end up creating a lot of growth and opportunity. And it's something that I think associations in particular can have a hard time with sometimes, especially since our members tend to sometimes be pretty rigid in terms of what they're looking for. Look for those creative opportunities to disrupt yourself and those expectations.
I love the idea of disrupting yourself. That's so good. I'd love to look forward a little bit more too before we go into our lightning round here. So are there any other big trends coming down the pipeline when you think about the intersection of event content and membership engagement? And what should associations be doing to basically buckle up and get ready for this so they're not left behind?
I think the beauty of event content and the beauty of associations is that there is something for everybody, right? There's an association for everything, and there is a way to tell that story, and it doesn't have to be the same. There's just so much content that can be created. I think that, this podcast that we're doing, content studios, webinars, and live digital engagements for virtual discussions, all of that is actually event content. It's maybe not the traditional conference and trade show model, but these are all ways that you can be engaging your members and telling their stories. And I just think there's so many collaborative opportunities with your communications team, with your membership team, with your marketing team, to be telling stories that really the sky is the limit at this point. and lean into technology. And I don't just mean for virtual events or hybrid events. We've all kind of been through the ups and downs of that the last couple of years, but is there virtual reality training for your industry, perhaps, that could be offered versus just sitting in a classroom? What are some of the new ways that AI and some of the technologies that are coming down the pike can really offer a fresh perspective? But really, the sky's the limit.
Absolutely. I love that. Okay, well, before we let you go today, so I feel like we've learned a lot about your work background and your passion that you bring to that. But we like to do a fun little lightning round so our listeners can get to know the personal side of you as well. So these are all easy questions, I promise. We'll jump right in. Tell us where you grew up.
Maryland, Prince George's County, Maryland.
Oh, so you're local. Okay.
Local. Yeah, not many of us.
What is your Starbucks order?
I actually don't drink coffee, so I would get an English breakfast tea.
That's my mom's order. That's funny. I am a hot chocolate drinker, so everyone thinks I love coffee because I do go to Starbucks a lot. I've never had a coffee in my life.
No, it's not my favorite.
Too funny. Okay, if you won the lottery tomorrow, would you still work?
You know what? I would find something that brings me joy, and I would volunteer as much as I could.
Yeah, that's a good way to go. What's the last show that you've binge watched?
So the last show we binge watched was Daisy Jones and the Six. So my husband and my 15-year-old and I watched it. It's based on an amazing book that was big a couple of years ago on Amazon Prime. It's a Fleetwood Mac-esque 70s band type show. It was a great soundtrack.
Oh, I like it. I'll have to add that to my list for sure. All right, what's a food you can't live without?
Thai food.
Oh, okay, good one. And finally, what is your bucket list travel destination?
Anywhere. I love traveling, but I would love to go to Greece and Thailand because I think I would be in foodie heaven.
Yes, I'm the same way though. Everywhere. I always say everything is on my list.
All of it.
Awesome. Kara, this was so much fun. And I just so genuinely appreciate you joining us on A100 today and sharing so many thoughtful insights for our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the opportunity.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Association 100 podcast, brought to you by the A100 publishing team, powered by Onward and Upward Marketing and Communications. You can subscribe to the Association 100 podcast on Spotify so you'll never miss out, or listen via our website at theassociation100.com. Follow us for all the latest insights and trends impacting the world of associations. Thanks for tuning in.